So this is Business Central. This is our lovely little role centre. And the first area within Business Central I wanted to touch on is around the customers themselves. As Richard briefly talked about earlier, you can set up your cash flow payment terms for your customers, for your suppliers. So if you know, in my case, my customer 30,000 has a current month payment term, they're a little bit cheekier because they always pay me in 60 days. I set up my cash flow payment terms to 60 days so that the cash flow can be more accurate. So it knows that actually the due date might be today, but we're not going to receive it for another 30 days. So it won't take it into account today that you're going to receive the money from them. And the other area, which I think is really important when we are talking about cash flow itself, is the actual cash flow chart of accounts. So there is a cash flow account. This is the big setup in the background where you drive what your receivables are, your payables are, your liquid funds. I've done a very basic one today, but you can change this to how you want. I can have begin and end totals. So for my liquid funds, I could specify each individual bank or petty cash, anything like that. Same with my receivables. If I have customers in the UK or in the EU, I've just done a very simple one for today's purposes. So I'm just going to go back to our role centre, as this is where every user starts off their lovely journey into Business Central. So I'm set up as an accountant. So the information that's being displayed on the screen right now is things that they think an accountant would like to look at first thing in the morning. Things like purchase documents overdue. These are my queues, so I can click on them and drill in. And I have my cash balance and everything like that. But my main ones I actually wanted to talk to you about are my two lovely little charts that I have here. So the first one is my finance performance. So this is my cash cycle. So all I'm going to do now is just push back some previous periods because our data is related 2 years from 2018 to May 2020. So I have a little bit more nicer data within my cash cycle. So what this is showing me is the days of sales outstanding, the days of payments outstanding, and I can see a lovely graph there in my face in the morning just to check how everything's going. I can also switch this. I have some other charts that I can go to, which is I can have a cash flow bar chart and my income and expense. So if I just pop my cash flow bar chart, it looks very nice against my cash flow forecast, which is our main purpose of today's webinar. So we have our cash flow forecast, as you can see, and we have our different menus around our receivables, our cash flow manual expenses, which I'll go into a bit more detail in a bit. But as you can see, we've got our lovely receivables, and our receivables and payables when dealing with cash flow forecast is around the due dates and also our cash flow payment terms, which I talked about earlier. This enables the system to work out when things are due. So right now, when I click on receivables, that's just my due dates. Same with my payables, that's stuff I've got in the system right now. The more interesting one is around the Azure AI. So the lovely little grey boxes. If you see when I'm hovering over each one, the colours are changing. So if I look at the Azure AI, you can see I've got two very big blocks in October and January. That's because based on our rhythm of how we've been putting the invoices on for this particular customer, every 3 months they put a massive order into the system. So Azure AI has predicted that they must be putting another big order in July, October and January. And that's the system learning that the pattern of that customer with the orders that you're putting on. It's the same with my tax. So my tax is this lovely little blue box. Because I paid my tax at the end, so I had my tax quarter and then I paid it the following month, the system picked that up. So it noticed that they pay tax at the end of the quarter the following month. So that's what Azure AI has done here. So you can see I've got these little grey boxes down here. That's the system predicting that I've got some VAT to pay in those months to enable your cash flow to be that little bit more accurate and no nasty surprises coming along the way. You can remove these filters. So for example, if I take out Azure AI, that's just my basic cash flow now based on the data that I have sat within Business Central. But of course, with Azure AI, it gives us that little bit more of realization of what could be coming in. The other area I wanted to talk about is, which is a Business Central, is around manual expenses and manual revenue. We all know, as part of our lovely month expenses, we have salaries. So as part of the manual expenses, you can pop your salaries in and you can select the recurrence, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, and we can have a start and end date. Obviously, mine are very simple. I only give my staff pay rises in this every year. So we have this, and that then feeds into the cash flow again. So the system is expecting salaries to be paid on a monthly basis, which enables the cash flow to be that little bit better before it's come out of your bank or before you've submitted payroll. It's the same with the revenue. So if you've got a revenue that comes in, so for example, I've done government grants. So the government gave me a yearly grant and now they've changed it to monthly. The system can recognise that I've got that monthly income coming in before it's even hit the bank account. So before I've done anything within the system, I can recognise that. And that's how the manual revenue and expenses work, to give you that fuller picture, as Rich was saying, real time. So it gives you a better idea of what cash is coming in and what cash is going out. So not everyone likes to look at a bar chart every morning. So what you can also do is run the cash flow worksheet. The cash flow worksheet will give you, so I'm just going to the cash flow worksheet now. This will give you the ability to see line by line where those figures are coming from. So if I just go to process and go suggest worksheet lines, I can define what I want to be displayed. So right now I want everything to come through because my cash flow consists of everything. If it didn't, you can just turn these on and off again. So if I click OK now, what the system's doing is it's going through the forecast. So it's picking up the AI stuff. It's drilling into the system to give me the lines to my cash flow now. So as you can see on my screen, I have a lovely lines of lots of cash flow with all their different source types. So my liquid funds, my receivables. But what it does tell me is where the figures are coming from now. So I can see that based on the 12th of May on an invoice that was done in July, that's why that figure's sat there in the May column for my sales and posted for my receivables within my cash flow. So I'm just going to filter out on source type right now, because as part of the cash flow worksheet, it also pulls in the Azure AI, which is the important thing. So you can see where Azure is calculating some of its predictions. So I have some deviations. This is based on some setup that we have in the background. So obviously this is plus or minus 53,000, but it's trying to predict as much as it can. The next place I'm just going to take us to is the cash flow forecast. So there is lots of little setup tables in the background, but I find with the cash flow forecast, once this has been set up, so I've just come to the setup bit, there's a really nice reporting function. But before I go there, I'm just going to refresh my cash flow for you. So with your cash flow, you can actually refresh it as often as you want. The system for us is set up daily, so this gets refreshed daily for us. But right now, I'm just going to manually refresh it. As you can see, the system, just like the cash flow worksheet, is calculating what the cash flow needs to be. And if you hover over each individual box, you can then see the figures that are broken down. And if it's got Azure, like I said, for that month of January, you can see Azure's working out some sales that are going to occur during that month. So if I now go back to my cash flow forecast, it has a lovely little report that sits within the cash flow forecast, and that's called cash flow availability by periods. So if you just drill into here, What you can see now, if I scroll up, I've now got my cash flow on a weekly basis. As I've set my view up to week, you can drill into the figures of the receivables, the sales orders, and you can see what's making up those figures of your cash flow. If you wanted to analyse it some more, you can change your view from day, week, month, quarter, year. I find it a really handy report because it gives you that little bit extra analysis on top of the bar chart that you can come in and drill down. And if I scroll all the way to the other side, it also has the total, so you can see how it's working. And the other area that we will use for reporting with cash flows is account schedules. Now, account schedules we will be talking a little bit more about on our next webinar, so you can find out a bit more, but essentially account schedules are financial reporting within Business Central. So we've created a couple here. So my cash flow cycle chart, so that lovely graph I showed you earlier in the role center, that's where this data is actually driven from. It's an account schedule that sits in the background. So what the account schedule gives you the ability to do is to go into it and once again see the figures. Where is it getting its figures from? How does it know how to work it out? And you can drill into the figures. You can change this if you didn't want to look at it for the month. You can change it to day, week, month, quarter. You can also change your dates if you didn't want to have a look at May, you wanted to have a look at June or even April because you just wanted to see how April was getting on. And there's one final area I wanted to talk about when we're dealing with Azure AI, and that is around payment predictions for customers. So within Business Central, there is payment predictions for customers based on whether they're good payers or not, which we all, like to know whether we've got a good payer or not with customers. Right now, we're using a standard model within Business Central, but there is the flexibility that it can be designed and customized to your needs. So from here, I'm going to go to the sales orders and show you what this prediction is doing. Give me 1 second. So I'm just going to open up my lovely little sales order. And from here, when I click prepare, and I do predict payment, so this is just order level, you can see that based on all of the information it's had on this particular customer, it thinks this customer is going to pay on time and it's got high confidence that they are going to pay this sales order on time once it's been posted. Now they do have the flexibility within the customer ledger entries as well. So the customer ledger entries is where everything gets posted when you post your invoices, and you can run the same prediction on there, so it can tell you at invoice level whether it feels it's high, low or medium confidence within the system of whether it's going to be paid, which is what any accounts receivables likes to know is, are their customers going to pay? So overall, with the ability of the data and Azure AI, it's giving you a more accurate cash flow as much as it can based on the data